Alright guys, so we are now officially starting to get some polling data in the aftermath of Joe Biden and Donald Trump's first presidential debate ahead of the November election, and it does not look too good for Joe Biden. So we're going to go through some of this polling data here from CBS News and YouGov, and then I have some more of the latest in terms of the cope coming out of Biden world and how it looks like they're basically just planning on steamrolling through this and pretending as if that debate never happened. So here's the first question, guys. Have mental and cognitive health to serve as president. And this is registered voters, so this isn't just Republicans or just Democrats, it's all of the above. For Joe Biden, 27% say yes, he does have the mental capacity to be the president. Guys, that's like 1/4 of the country. For Donald Trump, it's 50%. Now, I honestly think that's 50% too high, because I don't think that Donald Trump is mentally fit to be the president, but neither is Joe Biden. Let's be real about this. It wasn't just what we saw during the last debate. We've known about his decline for year after year after year. This was something that was being brought up even in the 2020 Democratic primary debates by some of his opponents. This isn't anything new. It's gotten significantly worse as time has gone on, and honestly, that debate performance was the worst that I've seen Joe Biden. But I mean, 27%, guys. I don't understand how anybody looks at numbers like this and they think that there's a plausible path forward for Joe Biden here. Not just that he can win the election, which is looking less and less likely. The only chance that he has is the fact that his opponent is Donald Trump. But beyond that, who really believes that Joe Biden even has the ability to make it through the next 4 years? I don't even know that he should be the president right now. And so we move on. I mean, it doesn't get much better from here, guys. God, 27%. 27% of the country thinks that you're mentally capable of being the president. What are we doing? Now, we also have another one here. At the debate, which candidate? And then they go question by question here. So this is, again, registered voters. So at the debate, which candidate presented their ideas clearly? 21% for Joe Biden. 47% for Trump. Which, again, I don't even really think is true. I mean, I guess maybe there's a lot of focus from him on, like, shutting down the border and whatnot. But, like, there were a lot of moments where Trump just absolutely refused to answer the question. Or he changed the direction of the question, like on abortion rights. When he's asked about the overturning of Roe v. Wade, he lies and he says, oh, everybody wanted us to do that. And then he also lies and he says, well, the conversation should really be about Democrats wanting to murder babies after they've already been born. So, I mean, it's not as if he was clearly laying out, like, a consistent and coherent policy agenda, but clearly that's what the American people took away from this. 28% say that Biden appeared presidential, with 46% saying that Trump did. Guys, this was like one of the go-to arguments for liberals back in 2020 and in 2016 was Trump is unpresidential. It looks like you're now losing that argument to Donald Trump. More people think he looked presidential than Joe Biden, who's the current president. Another one, inspired confidence. This is the worst. 18% of the American people were inspired by Joe Biden's performance. Again, 44% for Donald Trump. Again, explained plans and policies, 35% for Joe Biden. That seems extraordinarily generous there, with 43% for Trump. Now, another one here. Should Biden be running for president? So this isn't Democrats. We're going to have what Democrats think about in a second, but this is all registered voters. Should he be running for president? So back in, I think this is February of 2024, you had 37% saying he should, with 63%, close to a supermajority, saying he shouldn't. Now that's all the way up to 72% saying Joe Biden should not be running for president. Not just 72 saying, oh, well, maybe he shouldn't win. 72% saying he shouldn't even be running right now, with only 28% saying he should be running. So for Democrats, on the same question, the should back in February was 64%. It dropped down 10 points. Now it's at 54%. The should not went up by 10 points from 36 to 46%. Now this is like the highest I've seen this number actually in a long time. I've seen polling data going back months and months and months ago where Democrats overwhelmingly, like I think some of them were over 70%, said they didn't want Joe Biden to run again. They wanted somebody else to be leading the ticket. Now, I don't know if this is just an outlier poll or maybe it's because of the fact that we're so close to the November election that now a bunch of Democrats have basically thrown their hands up in the air and they're saying, well, there's no chance that he could possibly be replaced, so of course he should be running, right? Maybe that's the logic behind some of these numbers, but I mean, even with that sort of like generous interpretation of the polling, it's still close to 50% of Democrats in this poll saying he should not be running. We are months out from the election, guys. Another one. Why shouldn't Biden be running for president? So these are the top answers for voters who said that he shouldn't. Number one, surprise, surprise here, guys, 86%, his age. 71%, the decisions he might make in office, which, to be fair, is, I think, a fair point. 66%, his record as president. 59%, his ability to campaign effectively, which seems like pretty much the same point as the first one, which is his age. 86% saying his age. I wonder if this is going to be a big issue. Democracy. Okay, this is a shocking one. Okay? Democracy and the rule of law will be safe or not safe under each of the candidates. Again, if Biden wins, 48% say that democracy will be safe. If Trump wins, 47% say democracy will be safe. I mean, I don't think in the long run, if either of them win, democracy is safe. I would argue we don't even really have a functioning democracy right now with our campaign finance and how corrupted, legally corrupted, our political system is right now. But again, this is one of those go-to arguments that liberals use against Donald Trump, is to say this is an election where democracy is on the ballot. You hear this over and over and over again. Sure, Joe Biden's old and he stumbles and, whatever else, he's doing a genocide on the side. But, at the end of the day, he's protecting us from Trump-style fascism. He is the last vanguard protecting democracy. That's one of that's maybe their single go-to argument that they have in their arsenal. And the American people are saying, it's kind of a coin toss as to whether or not Trump or Biden would be a greater threat to democracy. I mean, not safe. 52% for Biden and 53%. This is a tie, guys. This is within the margin of error. You have the same amount of Americans saying that democracy is safe if Biden wins versus it's safe if Trump wins. And it's not safe if Biden wins and it's not safe if Trump wins. Again, this is one of their go-to arguments. How are we working around this, guys? Is that what you're banking the 2024 election on? That people will overlook the genocide, they'll overlook, the lack of accomplishments when it comes to materially improving the lives of average working class Americans. They'll overlook his obvious senility. But at the end of the day, they'll come back to us because something, we're protecting democracy. You're not even winning on that argument anymore. I mean, personal finances, this is another huge blow. Their policies would make you financially better off, financially worse off, or about the same. So they say if Biden wins, and this is again registered voters, 19% say they'll be financially better off, with 45% saying they'll be better off if Trump wins. That's a disaster, because regardless of what the election cycle is, the economy or economic issues typically are like either 1, 2, or 3 in terms of the list of important, subjects for voters. Now, financially worse off, 50% say they'll be financially worse off if Biden wins, with only 35% saying the same for Trump. And then about the same, 31% to 20%. Again, disaster. You're not winning on the we're going to protect democracy front anymore. And at the same time, you're getting absolutely crushed on the economy stuff, which also, by the way, isn't even accurate. I mean, if we're looking at comparing what Trump did during his administration, where his greatest accomplishment was a massive tax cut to wealthy billionaires and corporations, and we compare that to what Joe Biden has done, I can make a pretty solid, plausible argument that although I disagree with him on many things, and although I think he's a milquetoast neoliberal establishment sort of sellout guy who doesn't go nearly far enough in his economic platform, I could still make a solid argument that he's infinitely better when it comes to economic policy than Donald Trump is. But clearly the American people don't think that. A lot of that's probably inflation. A lot of it is what's happened since COVID and all of that. But I mean, Jesus, man, you are not selling an economic message that is effective right now. You're just not. Now we move on. Okay, absolute disaster for Joe Biden on the latest polling. Now, if only somebody could have seen this coming. If only, there was a whole group of leftists out there who have been predicting this for years on end, while being simultaneously gaslit and smeared by the mainstream media, by establishment Democrats for pointing out that Biden is senile. If only that had happened, right? Here we had an interesting article from, I believe this is the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal. They say the world saw Biden deteriorating. Democrats ignored the warnings. And we're going to read some paragraphs from this, but I do just want to say, like, it is infuriating. I covered some of these videos in my recent videos the other day. It's infuriating to see some of these same mainstream pundits, their reactions to the debate, where they're saying, oh my God, how did this happen? Where did this come from? And it's like, you guys are the same motherfuckers who have been trying to lie about this for years at this point. I mean, we had people who were basically trying to say that if you played the video of Joe Biden stumbling around looking at the paratroopers at the G7 summit, then you were engaging in cheap fakes, or you were taking it out of context, or you were being unfair to him, and he's actually really strong behind the scenes. Those same people then reacted to the debate as if this came out of nowhere. This came out of nowhere. How did he look like that? How did he sound like that? How was he so incompetent? This didn't come out of nowhere, guys. If only you had not been lying to the American people and helping to cover up for this. And the same goes for the Democrats surrounding Joe Biden, who refused to talk about this openly. And again, we're lying about it to the American people. Now, some of the paragraphs. This is basically, again, dealing with the G7 meeting, or summit, that Joe Biden recently went to. So they say, Biden missed the summit's dinner party in a medieval castle. First off, what the fuck are we doing, guys? Dinner party? European and American elite leadership going in a medieval castle to have dinner? What are we doing, guys? And it was also an off-camera and less scripted part of the summit when leaders often exchange views most candidly. Biden was the only G7 leader not to attend the meal. The White House told reporters in advance that he wouldn't be there because, oh, it's jam-packed, I'm busy. Guys, I just saw another article that came out, I think it was from Axios just yesterday, that was basically saying that behind the scenes, Joe Biden really is only capable of operating between the hours of like 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So I think that's what this was. It's a dinner party. Sorry, Joe Biden has a 4 p.m. bedtime because he's literally sundowning. This is where we're at, guys. This is where we're at. This is like a global meeting. This is a summit of the G7 leaders, and he can't show up to a dinner party because I guess he's too far gone at that point. It's too late in the evening. We also had officials said that Biden's performance and focus can vary hugely between meetings and even within a meeting. Two senior European officials cited an EU-US summit last October in Washington where Biden had struggled to follow the discussions. Both said that he stumbled over his talking points at several moments, requiring the Secretary of State Antony Blinken to intervene and point out the lines that he should use. We got Antony Blinken having to show Joe Biden on a note card which talking point he's supposed to hit because Joe is just totally lost. What do you even say at this point, guys? I mean, it's depressing and it's also almost hilarious to some extent. How have we possibly gotten to this far in this process where nobody around him is doing anything about this? They're all just helping to cover this up. They're all just in on it to protect, I guess, their own political asses. I mean, Joe Biden has surrounded himself by yes men, by people who are scared to challenge him. His inner circle has gotten smaller and smaller as his administration has gone on, and it seems like there's just nobody in his immediate vicinity that is willing to be honest with him or that is willing to confront him. I mean, again, I pointed this out the other day. It's at the point now where I don't even know that Joe Biden is mentally capable of understanding that he's going through cognitive decline. And that's a common thing with older people who do get dementia and other, cognitive or mental issues, is oftentimes they refuse to, out of stubbornness or, out of an inability to do so, they refuse to admit their own decline. And I think that that's what's happening with Joe Biden here. I mean, Antony Blinken stepping in because he's in an important EU-US summit meeting and he can't figure out what talking points he's supposed to hit. Man. Now, we also had this. I don't know if I mentioned this in my previous video, but this was pretty big. The New York Times editorial board basically called on Joe Biden to drop out. They say to serve his country, President Biden should leave the race. We also had the Atlanta Journal-Constitution say the same. We also had, I believe, the Washington Post editorial board say the same. Many, close Biden allies in print and in, regular, media were coming out and saying the same thing. I showed you guys the clips from CNN and MSNBC and, Morning Joe and all of that. There was a significant moment here. Right? A couple of days ago, there was a 2-day window of time right after the debate where it seemed like everybody's piling on. And I was sitting here and I was looking, I was like, the New York Times editorial board. This is Joe Biden's top ally in the entirety of the U.S. media ecosystem. And even they are coming out and saying, you need to drop out to protect the country, to stop us from getting another Trump term. So there was a moment of time there where I was like really hopeful. I was like, oh my God, if even these people, maybe they're just throwing him under the bus. Like maybe they're actually going to try to force him out. And then in the subsequent days after that, I've slowly seen them all start to fall back in line. And they all start to walk back their previous criticisms. After Obama came out and backed Joe Biden and said, no, we all have bad debate nights. He's going to, stick in the race. Jill Biden coming out saying the same thing, backing him. Then you start to see like the Pod Save America bros. They initially came out and were really critical of his performance. And then I guess maybe they got like a call from Obama behind the scenes. They start to walk back their claims. It's like they're all starting to try to fall in line and to get behind the messaging that, oh, well, we all have bad nights. Joe Biden's a candidate. There's nothing we can do. We all need to just rally behind him because we need to stop Trump from getting elected. Now, if you're like a hardcore Democrat, I understand why that argument would be appealing to you. But you have to understand that that is just not enough to win the election. It's just not. There are countless, we just looked at the polling data, guys. There are countless normies out there who may not have seen Joe Biden make public appearances, because he doesn't do many, by the way. Fewer than most presidents in modern American history, in terms of the interviews that he does, the public appearances and speeches. But like, if you're a normie American who's like loosely keeping up with politics, and then you watch that debate, how many millions of Americans saw his performance and they're like, this man is gone. This man is half dead. Not only, is he not fit to run for office right now, he may not even be fit to be the president at this moment. You can't just turn around and purely rely on, well, Trump is bad and he's an authoritarian threat. I actually agree that he is an authoritarian threat. He is bad. But I'm not the person you have to convince. You have to convince the normies. And this argument is just not going to work, especially considering that it's not just a binary choice between Trump and Biden, as much as people want to make it out to be. There are also going to be people who vote for the Green Party, right? Whether it's Joe Biden's failures on economic issues or healthcare issues or his support for a genocide in Gaza, there are going to be people who vote for the Green Party. There are going to be people who vote for RFK. Probably more are going to vote for RFK after that debate, just purely out of spite for Trump and Biden. And there are also going to be people who just stay at home. So you're battling on all fronts. You can't just say Trump is awful. We know who Trump is. We all saw him as president for 4 years. We saw him run for re-election in 2020. We saw January 6th. We all know this. So if that's not working, and that's your main argument that you're using, and you've been using that the entire time, and you're still losing in the swing state polls, in the polls that actually matter, then clearly it's not going to be effective in the long run. Now, we also had this report here from NBC, as pointed out by Emma Vigilant. She says, NBC reports that Biden was humiliated by his debate performance and is discussing his future with his family tomorrow. They also say that Clyburn, Jeffries, and Pelosi have all privately expressed concerns about his viability, but that Jill Biden is the one that he'll most listen to. Now, some bad news on the Jill Biden front, because she just recently was out posing for Vogue, right? In one of the most out-of-touch ways that you could possibly imagine. This was the leading paragraph in this Vogue article, by the way. If you want to know what power feels like, try to get yourself driven around in a motorcade. Flashing police chaperone lights form a perimeter as you blaze down an empty highway, waiting for cars backed up on entry ramps as you pass. It's as if the world is holding its breath for you. Guys, this is how out of touch they are. Listen, Jill Biden, as I said before, may be like one of 2 or 3 people in the country that could actually sit down with Joe Biden and have a conversation with him that could lead to him willingly stepping aside. And she clearly does not want to do that. She doesn't. She's blowing full steam ahead. She's taking the lead at some of these rallies, like the one that happened right after the debate where she was screaming into the microphone and saying, "You did so good, Joe," right? So she clearly wants to stay in this position, and I mean, it looks like her ego is just taking precedence over everything. I don't know how I could even do this to a family member of mine. I've told you guys this before, but both my grandparents on my mom's side had dementia. As they were going through that process, even in like the earliest stages of it, even before I knew that they had dementia, I still would never have said, you should be the president, right? Not just because of like a lack of competency on policy or whatever, but just mentally. Like, it's a form of elder abuse at this point. There is no way that I could have a family member who's in the current state that Joe Biden is in, and that I would advise him to keep going. I mean, I would be pulling him aside. You need to step down, for even just for your own health's sake. I mean, can he even make it physically through the next 4 years? I don't think so. I mean, I genuinely don't. But the other thing is that all these people listed here, Clyburn, Jeffries, Pelosi, they say that they're expressing concerns privately about his viability, but I also just saw Nancy Pelosi on, I think it was CNN or MSNBC, one of the two, where she was fully defending him. She was going balls to the wall to defend him. Same with James Clyburn as well. He was also on the mainstream networks defending him. By the way, Pelosi and Clyburn are also 150 years old and probably shouldn't be in their positions anymore. So we have like people who are also way too old to be in office going out and defending Biden on age concerns when clearly behind the scenes it looks like even they are concerned. They're just not willing to say anything publicly about it. Now, as pointed out by Axios here, this is apparently the strategy that Dems are going with. So the Biden survival strategy based on Mike Allen and Jim Vandehey's weekend conversations with top officials and advisors. Number one, dismiss bedwetting. That's what they're calling it. They're saying people who looked at the debate and said, this guy is clearly senile, that is bedwetting. And everybody just needs to stop freaking out. This will all blow over. He's young and, vigorous and all of this and that. Number two is squeeze polls for juice. Well, we just looked at some polls, so I don't know how well this is going to work for you on that front. Number three, warn of chaos. Warn of chaos if Trump wins. Again, the Trump bad strategy. The Trump is a threat to the country strategy. We'll see how that works, I guess. And number four, limit dissent, which is something they've been doing very successfully for a long time, right? Clearly, because so many people were shocked by his debate performance. I mean, they've clearly been limiting dissent behind the scenes. I mean, they also didn't have an open primary, by the way, which kind of like flies in the face of the idea that you guys are the vanguard protecting democracy when you wouldn't even allow a democratic process to play out in your own primary. So, I mean, again, it's utter delusion, guys. It is utter delusion. I have one more thing here. As I spoke to voters at a Las Vegas rally, here we have Simon Levian. And it was a rally for Vice President Harris. A Nevada Biden campaign staffer followed me and twice asked that voters end their interviews when their comments turned critical of President Biden. This is a journalist going to a rally and asking voters about their positions, right? And what they thought about Kamala and what they thought about Joe Biden. And you have a campaign staffer for Biden following this journalist around, trying to cut off interviews midway through the second that they become critical of Joe. So I guess this is what they meant by limiting dissent. One undecided voter, Stephen Stubbs, that's quite a name there, said he wished Biden would step aside and let Harris be the presidential nominee. The staffer interrupted, saying, "I'm going to stop it here. Sorry, if I can. It's a Biden event. Is that okay?" I mean, it's just humiliating. They genuinely think, like, if we just stick our heads in the sand and pretend that everything's fine and try to shut people up for pointing out the obvious, then we'll all be good and we'll ride off into the sunset. I think I showed you guys this before, but this is like one of the emails they were sending out to people after the debate. When you get an email like this, okay, from the campaign themselves, clearly it wasn't a good night, right? And of course they do it in like this bizarrely personal way, as if this isn't going out to like 1 million people. They say, hey, if you're like me, you're getting lots of texts or calls from folks about the state of the race after Thursday. Maybe it was your panicked aunt, your MAGA uncle, or some self-important podcasters. Looks like they were calling out the Pod Save America bros there. It's a tough position to be in, so I thought it might be helpful to send you a few responses. Guys, they are sending talking points. They are sending talking points out to voters to use against their MAGA uncle and their aunt. What is this? How is this what we're doing now? You had such a bad debate performance that you're now having to try to cope with it by sending out talking points so that people can try to gaslight their family into thinking that you're fine. I mean, it really is. It's hard to believe that this is the reality that we're living in. A little bit more delusion here. This is from the Biden campaign memo from their campaign chair. He said, if we do see changes in polling in the coming weeks, it will not be the first time that overblown media narratives have driven temporary dips in the poll. I don't know, guys. It's like they don't want to win. It genuinely is. You think this is an overblown media narrative? Really? No, this is a complete collapse of the Biden campaign. That's what this is. This is Joe Biden putting his ego over the country. That's what's actually happening right now. And they just refuse to accept it. This is it's a media narrative. No, it's not, bro. We all watched the debate. We all watched the debate live. We saw him start to finish. It's not a media narrative when the entire fucking country is on the same page. You guys are the ones trying to spin a media narrative that is, an alternative to reality. One last thing. I mean, I guess we already talked about that. So that was the last thing. There you go. Joe Biden riding off into the sunset on a Vogue cover, I guess. So I don't know, guys. I really don't even know what to say at this point. I mean, I would hope that maybe they just don't want to admit this right now, but maybe behind the scenes, They are kind of admitting it to themselves, and there's a little glimmer of hope there that something could happen at the DNC convention, and Biden will gracefully bow out of the contest, and then it'll be a little bit of chaos. And I really don't know exactly how the procedures would play out. I got to look more into that in terms of how they would go about picking a replacement for him. Like, would it automatically go to Kamala? Where would the funding that they've raised throughout this campaign, I mean, that's millions of dollars, would that automatically go to Kamala, or would it go to the Democratic Party? Would they pick Whitmer? Would they pick Newsom? Like, there are so many different questions about how that process would play out. But that may actually be the last hope. If you don't want to see Donald Trump get elected, at this point, before I would have said it was a 50-50 coin toss, but you just simply cannot have over 70% of the country saying you are not cognitively capable of being the president. You just can't have that and win the election.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying